everyone, welcome back to But Why Though, and today we have a hands-on preview with Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. As always, I'm Kate, and I'm here today with Andrea.
Hi, everyone. I am Andrea Sharon. I'm an associate editor over at Destructoid, and I'm excited to join Kate today and talk about some Dawntrail.
I think a good way to start this is to say what our mains are. I am a
Okay.
paladin, I am a tank. This is kind of going to influence how I was looking at a lot of things. Andrea, what about you?
So I've historically played Scholar. I play casters in general, but I do really like playing healer. I've played White Mage. This recent raid tier, I raided on Astrologian. I can kind of play Sage if you force me to. Um, have a long career as a Dragoon on the floor, and I
Hey,
think
we
that
need
kind
those
of
floor
covers it.
tanks. We need those
Yeah.
floor tanks. That's a
I
balanced party.
I think that's one of the things that we bonded over during the Dawn Trail preview event was my long storied history as a Dragoon and being kindly ushered off of that role during my first raid group where they were kind of like, we really love you, but you're not great at this job. So
It's funny. I wound up as a paladin because I was a rogue in Neverwinter. That was like
Mhm.
the first MMO I played with my husband, and he was like, "I love you, you beautiful, kind soul, but please don't TPS."
That no that's me, and this would be an expansion with two DPS
Yeah.
added. So
I will say though, I do have a Nighty Sam that I do at least like I don't do savage content on it, but I do go run through regular raids on it pretty good there. So I will say going into it, my expectations were pretty high. Primarily because I think for me, when they released the first key art for Dawntrail, I was immediately like, oh my God, we are going to Latin America. This is Mesoamerican. These are my people. Yoshi-P, you gave Graha a taco. Let's go. This is all I've wanted. And then I think when I saw the art and the Vipor release, that was when it kind of kicked into high gear. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is
yeah.
really cool. And I know that that sounds kind of like basic as a way to relate to it, but I think that Final Fantasy has been a game that I've cycled off of and then cycled back into. And after the very strong focus on single player content with Endwalker, I think kind of cycled off. And then hearing everything for Dawn Trail just kept getting me more excited and more excited for reinvesting my time into it and finding people like you to play with and stuff like that. So what were your expectations for Dawn Trail coming into our preview?
But I feel like before I can even tell you my expectation about just Dawn Trail, I have to tell you about my kind of long history of setting myself up and getting really, really anxious and then being like, oh, okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I've been there at this point since 2013, since the whole expansion cycle for every single game, and kind of being like, oh God, I hope this one lives up to my expectations now,
Yeah.
And then we did that with Heaven's Ward, and I was like, okay, really enjoyed Heaven's Ward. I bet I won't like the next one because at some point I have to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Um, no,
Yeah.
I mean Stormblood wasn't my favorite, but it's still a good ass game.
Yes.
So loved Stormblood, saw the direction they were taking with Shadowbringers, and I was like, I kind of hate this. I think I'm not gonna like this at all. Uh, did that whole moment where you walk into the Crystarium and was like, actually, I think this is probably the best game I've ever played. Um, so, with Endwalker, I was kind of like, all right, I'm done like expecting the worst. And again, was pleased with Dawn Trail. There's been a weird lull for me, like going
Yeah.
into it. I went to FanFest, was really pumped there, but kind of hit this moment where I was like, man, I wrapped up all of these plot threads in this 10 years worth of storytelling, these big moments, these big arcs. And I kind of missed that part of the game. And I went through this raid tier. I did Savage, and we cleared all three tiers, but it was kind of a crummy tier for me. And I
Yeah.
was kind of bummed for the whole thing. Um, And I don't know what it was exactly about it, but it definitely lost that oomph for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I think even in the preview event, some Yoshida even mentioned it. He was talking about the bosses that are just kind of like
Yes.
giant
Giant
striking
hitbox,
dummies.
and that's all
Yes.
it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I'm like, you know, I play Scholar mostly Astrologian this tier, and it's like, sure, that doesn't matter for me as much, but I do feel it, you know, when nobody's
Yeah.
moving, when I'm not having to be cognizant of where everybody is in the arena, all of that other stuff. This is all a lot to say. When we went to this preview event, I finally walked out and felt like, all right, this is it. This is like expansion season. Now I'm happy. Now I'm
Yeah.
excited. There is no more like feeling bummed about it. I love where we're going. At first I was like, oh, it's not Mercidia, it's not the dragons. I'm so sad. But then for like all of these reasons, you know, I don't have a lot of familiarity with some of its inspirations, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like I see all of these places and all of these different designs that I am so unfamiliar with, and all of this architecture and these colors and these patterns and these textiles, and I'm just like, holy shit, this place is beautiful.
Yeah.
And everything that he has conveyed, everything that Yoshida was talking about in those previews, um I was like, all right, this is spot on. Like I am all about it. I am picking up what you're putting down, like but no, I'm excited to hear more and what you think specifically of some of those inspirations. What do they nail? Is there anything that like
Yeah.
you're itching to see more
Oh my
of? Just
gosh. I am like, okay, so I will say there is a written interview down below for people watching this video in the comments where I got to talk to Yoshida-san. And I asked him about how they took the existing Mesoamerican mythology, the Andean mythology, and brought it forward. And he was talking about how the team, the development team, was just so excited to go to a different place, to go to a place that Final Fantasy had not been before, and to do the research and learn things. And like he even said, he was like, if we wanted to use an aesthetic of like a rune on a tile, we researched it to make sure it fit with the mythology of the boss that we were putting in. And that's the type of care that I was looking for when I was running through Tural, which is the capital city of Tural. And you could see like these little small moments of architecture that reminds me of the culture that I grew up in. And I think so for those watching, like I'm indigenous, like I'm indigenous and Mexican, and a lot of my upbringing were hearing these stories and seeing these old ruins and understanding our past as something that's living and breathing, and like desperately wanting to see our mythologies brought out. Because I mean, flying serpent, like flying feathered serpent, like that's just really cool. Like flaming swords, really cool. Jaguar people, really cool. Hello, Rothgars. And I think that that's something that like really hit when I was running through the different cities was I could tell how much the development team had, down to the food that they were placing everywhere, down to the textile colors and the different designs for different areas. Because in Tolial, it's very hard to say because I want to say it in like the Nawa way because I can
yeah.
see where the inspiration came from, but I'm trying to say it in the Final Fantasy way. So in Tolial, it is very inspired by like Mexico City and like Mexico, and the dungeon that we got to run through, which was Iuk Iukatuma. That
I have
is
it pulled up.
also, yeah. So it's a IHUYKATUMU. It's a level 91 dungeon. It there's like cenotes, and you're running down, you start on a river barge made out of wood. And the river, it looks like Xochimilco. It looks like a river that runs through Mexico and around Mexico City. It's one of those things where it's like I can see all of these bits of not just like aesthetic for aesthetic's sake, but aesthetic for story's sake.
Mhm.
And it kind of pulled it all together because we'd been playing for a few hours when I went to go talk to Yoshida-san, and he was just very focused on like we wanted to do something different. And it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh yeah, like most of Final Fantasies, I have not played every one, but most of them are like very European inspired,
Yeah.
very much that high fantasy, realm, which is great. But you could tell that the development team was pushing themselves in a new way to do new environments, tackle new plants, research new areas, deal with new things. And I think the important thing that if you're watching this to understand is that it's not painted with one brush. The main city, that's like Mexico City, but then you go to Urukpacha and that's like in the Andes. Like that's like Peruvian,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
Incan inspired. You have the snow-topped mountains with the very different architecture. And you can tell that like what they did when they were making Tural is that they didn't just say, okay, cool, we're gonna make everything Tulum. Uh that would have been an easy way out, and they didn't. They really embraced the idea of a continent and showing each of the different areas in a continent with distinct styles, environments, and everything like that. So that is to say, I really loved it. We obviously didn't get story stuff, so I can't speak on any of that yet. But yeah, it has my heart. It has my heart.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was very excited. It it it's really cool to see. Like
Yeah.
I did not, if you had told me that there would be a Latin American
Mhm.
inspired expansion for my favorite MMO, I would not have believed you. And here we are.
No,
So
hearing your excitement like that, I don't know, it's like a snowball effect, right? Like
yeah.
hearing you speak to all of these things, I'm like, I gotta go Google this right now. Like this sounds so cool. This was kind of like the same impact that Razat Han had on me because hearing so many
Yeah.
people talk about like, oh, I see these little bits and these like these pieces of like my culture and this and my
Hmm.
husband is Armenian and he was like, oh well this looks like a type of jewelry that I'm more familiar with and he was like telling me all about his babushka and like what that meant to him and I was like, this is so specific,
Yeah.
but it's so pretty and I don't know, having a world that seems so put together with care even
Hmm.
whenever I'm not familiar. I think there's this impact that whenever something is that thoughtfully, pieced
Yeah.
together, um, that it shows regardless of like my familiarity.
Hmm.
And I was kind of talking about that in my preview that there are all these little places. Um, Kozam, I have it written down. Kozamaku, Maka, Mak,
Oh yeah.
the
Kozamaluka.
There we go. Koza Mauka. There
Yeah.
we go. We're going to hear that in my Southern drawl 400 times until I get that right. Um, but that zone, seeing all of the levels and the way that
Yeah.
it's not just one biome that's like all shoved together, like, oh, this is the rainforest and it's like trees and it's, that's it. Um, it felt like there were all these different levels that the tribes had there. Even the care and little things of Ishikawa, like a couple of patches ago, actually maybe it was before Walker at this point saying, we're moving away from some of the like smaller elements we don't realize that are so harmful, calling them like beast tribes.
Yeah.
We're referring to these places, these people, all of these cultures that are mixed in between here as just the tribes of this area.
Yeah.
Seeing the care in these things set up in that zone and how they vary and transition from spot to spot, I was just like, I love it. Everything feels
Yeah.
handcrafted. Um, I don't know. Going around there and digging, you talk about some of the story stuff. Looking at it, I feel like I have pieced together where we begin in that map and where we end and kind of how we get there. Because at the beginning of the dungeon, I saw Alice warn us about who we were dealing with on that boat. And
Hmm.
I was like, all right, so this is a Mamulja that now owes me a boat, and I know
Yeah.
his name because he crashed mine just now. I won't go beyond that. But the dungeon, all of that, like the dungeon kind of shows that same journey that I went on,
Yeah.
experiencing it from like here are the lowest levels of this rainforest where all of the water runs off and the rice
Hmm.
paddies and that surrounding area, and going up it into the mountainside and seeing all of that stuff work
Yeah.
in through the background.
Yeah.
And that was incredible. Like seeing the dungeon work so much of that in and feel like a real transition in that game instead of just like a side thing that I can't always even remember where it's placed on the map.
Yeah.
Those little details really stood out to me this time more than they ever have
Yeah.
in any expansion.
And it feels, I think one of the reasons that it stands out too, because I felt the exact same thing. There's a verticality to the design that I think
Yes.
is what makes it have an impact. Because I think like when you think about like memorable zone designs and level designs, it's the things that are built up, not just
Yeah.
flat. And that's what makes the dungeon really, really cool. And I think from like a game sense, like it feels like a big swing. It feels like this development team was like, we want to get out of our comfort zone, doing what we know, doing what the series has always done, and we want to just swing for the fences. And I know like Yoshi-P's like described it as like a beach vacation, which I think is great because I'm like, yes, we're in an anime, let's go. And there's gonna be a tournament arc with what they released for the
Yes.
new raid. Like this is perfect. But I do think that it's an ambitious expansion, and I think that each of them have been ambitious in their own way. But I think world-wise, this is ambitious because they have to push themselves farther to tell a different story, to blend two entirely different, unconnected sides of the world in Final Fantasy together, and where it meets in the middle and kind of like resolving that conflict. Like I'm excited for the action, like the story pieces between the characters. Because in my interview with Yoshida, he was explaining how there's going to be a big emphasis on cultural connection and cultural conflict, and how you deal with like meeting new people, learning new ways, kind of like how we see at the end of the MSQ and like Endwalker, where everybody's just kind of looking at her like she's a little weird.
Yeah.
um and so I think that's what's going to be exciting. From like a mechanic standpoint of the dungeon though, I think it was also really interesting because it didn't feel the same. Like obviously I tank, so a lot of the ways in which the earlier dungeons have been the boss fights have been simplified to be just easier to clear and faster to clear when you're doing roulettes. And to your point, running the raid content from Endwalker, where it is like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm just there. I don't have to move most of the time. The most I have to do is stand in a quarter so I don't laser beam the whole party. Um, I think that this dungeon had an emphasis on movement with a lot of the bosses that was greatly appreciated. You couldn't zone out. Like you had to
Yeah.
keep moving, especially the final boss. And I know I went in as a paladin, let other folks do the TPSing. But even then, like getting to experience those mechanics and a couple of new enemy types, that was exciting because
Yeah.
I felt locked in again. And I think that that's something that I've kind of like I've just been craving to like feel that, not harder content, but like I feel like there's been a lot of job compression where your job doesn't really feel that important anymore. And then once you know a fight and it's done. I think the focus on movement through here, especially for your melee classes and for your support classes that have to watch everybody, you're gonna see a big impact.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel as a healer.
No, no, I think you nailed it. And I think you nailed the sentiment that so many people at this point are starting to feel. There is, and I mean, you heard him, Yoshida acknowledged it again,
Yeah,
this sort of homogenization amongst all the roles
exactly.
and their identity. And you know, I played while we were at the event, I played machinist, a little summoner, all of the healers, um, hit a striking dummy with the warrior changes and have no idea what I did. So that one doesn't count. But um I still feel it. I still feel that homogenization. But, Yoshida talked a lot, and even over at my coverage, you can check out at Destructoid later. Um, I speak to some of that acknowledging the pain
Yeah.
points in the game. And he is reckoning with the fact that with so much, over tweaking this and over tweaking that and capitulating to every little thing,
Yes.
players being like, I want that. Like whenever we as machinists were like, why don't we have as much party mitt? Why doesn't our party mitt matter as much as the dancers? And now we have it. Now we have the Looney Tunes wrench dismantle. And we're one of the more meta classes to take
Yeah.
again. But now we're also all getting to be the same.
Yeah.
So I don't think that relief is there with
Yeah.
the immediate expansion release, but I
Mhm.
would give it a patch and see how the
Yeah.
raid design is. And I
Exactly.
think that determines so much. But the mechanics in the dungeons often, show so much of like a tiny taste of what we can expect. Not always, but often, it's kind of
Yes.
like a learning, like, oh, let's look at this and what is different and what is new. And I think what stood out to me was there was that big red flashing text that popped up in
Yes.
every single fight.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're teaching people. Like, I kind of autopiloted through a lot of that text. And for me and you, like, that may not make a big
Yeah.
difference. But when I saw it for the third time, I was like, I have a lot of friends that just play this game way more casually.
Yeah.
And if I could just like get them to like make a couple of connections here and there, I feel like they could have it. I feel like
Yeah.
they would kind of have that same draw that I have to some of the harder fights.
Hmm.
Um, and I think those are the baby steps that we take
Yes.
to get people into that position, because as much as I love this game, I don't think it's good at teaching anything.
Yeah.
Um,
It relies on the community to teach everything
yes,
versus having it baked in.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I will we had a lot of great conversations about mentor roulette over a couple
Yeah.
drinks, and that's probably a whole nother 3-hour podcast for another day. But I know we're on that wavelength there about how some of those things work and feel.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do think this is a lot to say. There's a lot of good setup there for teaching other people how to
Mhm.
play. And they may not be in the weeds as me or you or some of the more hardcore players that are watching, but for the average player that's just
Yeah.
really into Final Fantasy, this might be another
Yeah.
push for them. And that stuff is cool. Like, that's cool as
Oh
hell.
yeah. Well, and I think that that's one of the things that I think is interesting, and we're gonna see it with the expansion release, and I think you're right on the money with the first patch, is during the Q&A, and I think he's really been talking about it since the PAX East panel and at
Mhm.
FanFest. Yoshida's been talking a lot about, okay, cool, we got the single player people in. Let's get them to do other stuff. And I think what they're starting to do now is build those bridges to make single players a part of the larger community and kind of give them tools to make the jump towards doing the content in the way that some of the more multiplayer focused folks are, or even just people who are running solo without an FC. So like you're
Yeah.
not going to get as much exposure to the dungeons, the mechanics as anybody who is a regular raid night. And I think that I think that that's what's going to be interesting because there is a very concerted effort right now, I think, with the launch of Dawntrail to get back to the MMO part of the
Mhm.
game. And
Yeah.
that's what excites me because I think if they do it with enough care, like they've done for a lot of their stuff, they will be able to build that bridge very firmly between people who jump in to run with trusts and people who are running just content with, in Party Finder and everything like that. And I think that that is going to just continue to elevate the game
Yeah.
in a way that I don't think others are doing. And I think that that's exciting.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think I'm so glad you mentioned trust, because Yoshida had this moment, and I'm going to paraphrase, it's not a direct quote or anything, but he
Yeah.
said something about like, you know, what do you think like people are doing the trust for, or something to that extent? What do you think is the scariest thing to new players? What keeps them from playing? And
Hmm.
it's ultimately that fear of other players and letting them
Yeah.
down and all those anxieties. But people aren't just running things with duty support only, with the trust only. They're going through and they're doing it as like a practice run.
I
And he
had
has
never
all
thought
of them.
about that.
It's
I
such a
until he said that, I had never thought about that.
yeah, yeah. I my husband raids, and he was like, "No, I do that," and I was like, "Oh, really?" But no, I do it too, just because I was telling you, there was one oh God, I can't remember the name of the dungeon now. But it was one of the patch dungeons where Estinian's like, yeah, I put on some weight and now I can't jump very well anymore.
Yes.
It's like flavor text and these things are so good. Why would you, even for people that are rating, if you're into it for the lore, like absolutely
On
run
it.
through
Yeah.
it with Estinian and Graha and all them. Like their commentary is perfect. I ran through with the few people that we had available in Dawntrail. I keep wanting to call it Dawntrailer so bad. Dawntrail. And they had most of the snippets were clipped out. Yoshida said it was to avoid spoilers and all that, but they had a couple of moments they left in, and I was like, oh, they still got it, and they're still absolutely worth running the dungeon with and
Yeah.
just seeing what they have to say.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that like it's an exciting time, and I think what is good about Dawntrail, like we've wrapped up Heidelin and Zodiark, we've wrapped up the saga, and I think that it's time to go to a new space, not just a new place, but like a new way of like of how it sees community and how everything is going and how it builds for the future, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I think taking it to the new classes, so I will admittedly say I'm not a caster. I can't do it. It is very hard. So I did not play a lot of Pictomancer. I just hit the dummy a few times to try and learn the book, but I did play a lot of Viper because I kind of went into it thinking that it was going to be a lot like Sam, and I feel like it feels like Samurai.
Mhm.
It's not like Samurai, and I don't want to like, but it
Yeah.
feels like it. The same muscle memory and choices that you make with the combos that you're performing. So I really liked Viper. I liked the little blurb that they had it, like they're Turali hunters. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. The culture has its own like hunting style. That's awesome. And I'm a sucker for dual blade anything. But what really fascinated with me for the rotations is there are a lot of them. It's not just one singular rotation that you go through. And I think to your point about like there still is a lot of that job homogenization. The one thing that I've been worried about very specifically with the like getting rid of some of the bloat with the buttons, or with the abilities has
Mhm.
been that it's just gonna be one, 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 and I don't want to check out. I think Viper, if Viper is any an indication of where it's going, like it is just it's de-bloating, but you're not going to lose complexity, hopefully. Because you have your single target rotation, your AoE rotation, and then you have two paths for each of those.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of choice, there's a lot of agency, and there's a lot of needing to learn how to play it. Like I played Viper for like a couple of hours. I still don't feel like in a good way. I
Yeah.
still don't feel like I've uncovered all of the great ways to play. And they even gave us a rotation paper to help us out. Like, but still, like there was more, and I was enjoying digging, and I was enjoying finding out when it was best to use when it was best to switch, if I could switch in the middle of a single target rotation into the AoE, and like how that actually worked. And I think it's a very fluid class, and I think a lot of melee DPS players are going to be really, really happy with it, especially because I feel I don't know, I don't like a lot of the melee DP, which I guess is
Yeah.
why they're redoing elements of ninja, and they're doing monk too, right? Like they're was it ninja and monk, or was it just ninja and dragoon?
So Monk, I know some of what changed. I played a little bit of Monk, and I don't think that people today know what they're doing on Monk. That's a joke. But I don't believe anybody knows how to play that class the same way I don't believe anybody knows how to play Astro, even though I play Astro. All of that being said, I can't really speak to how drastic the Monk changes are, but Dragoon definitely like got some workarounds. It didn't go the direction I thought, but it
Mm-hmm.
did change. And I think some of that still is in the same vein of all right, these are still kind of samey. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think that there's enough distinction there that Viper like scratches an itch, even if it's just like aesthetically, because
Yes.
yeah, I am not a good Astro. I don't claim to be. I'm not gonna be in anybody's world first group. I am world last. But uh over Scholar, even though I can outperform myself in every regard on Scholar, I just feel really cool on Astro. Like flipping through the cards, the animations, it's satisfying. I clip all of my abilities into each other. I quadruple whatever the number is after quadra weave, I'm sure. I ruin everything. Don't check my upload history. All of that being said, I love Astro. It's the aesthetic, it's the look, it's the kind of attitude that job carries. And I swapped briefly to Viper after hearing you talk about it some while we were there and was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I also look like Assassin's Creed
Yeah.
vibes. So I'm down.
Also, like, who
Um,
doesn't want to start like this with their weapon and then break it apart to have two weapons? Like, come on now. Like that's just
what is that thing called? I
I
cannot
have
remember the
I have
name.
no idea. I keep wanting to compare it to Darth Maul's lightsaber. I'm
Oh,
like, it's taking everything inside of me to not do that, but
I cannot remember the name. It's like Zidane's weapon from Final Fantasy
it
IX.
is.
And it like breaks apart, and he does dying and whatever else all those like flashy abilities are that remind me of the other stuff that we
Yeah.
will talk about later.
It does not have an
Yeah.
official name on the paper. It just says
Okay.
uses two one-handed blades that can be combined into a single two-handed weapon.
I swear to God, Zidane's thing has some sort of name. I could be making that up. But all of that being said, I probably will sound the same way playing Pictomancer, but I can tell you that that thing uses a canvas and a paintbrush. But no, but in all seriousness, it's you swap stances. To me, it's
Mm-hmm.
well like summoner almost. So you move through the different rotations, like the different stances. There's like the creature canvas and then the weapon one. There's one more
Landscape.
landscape. Thank you. And swapping through those, you have again like your AoE rotation, you have your single target rotation, but I don't understand how some of the casts work. Some of them to me, just like in passing and trying to get a feel for it, it seems like they take a while. So I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like whenever I hard cast way too long on like red mage or
Mm.
something, and I'm like, oops, that means I am not doing this right. So I know I wasn't playing Pictomancer right, but I was like kind of kicking around on it. And the aesthetic is cool. I've seen some of the like complaints of feeling, oh, it's out of place, it's yada yada. I mean, I fly around in a
I run around
car.
with a Poogie. Like,
Yeah, like
have you ever just been running through Radz-at-Han and then a fall guy pops up? Like,
yeah, no,
what
exactly.
game do you
It's
play if you have a complaint for Pictomancer? Reaper's like pulling out full Demon Slayer like looking graphics when it does its attacks. Like,
yeah.
come on now, come on, y'all. Be serious, people.
Yeah, it's not a I took Kryle along for the ride in the trust dungeon and was like, this is fine. This is adorable.
You
This
sweet
fit.
little baby.
Yeah, she felt like I think you pronounce it Aiko. I always want to call her Eco, but I think it's pronounced Aiko from Final Fantasy IX. She reminded me a lot of her. That sort of, I guess it's the Nadine motif that you
Mm-hmm.
see through the paintings.
Yeah,
But all of that, I was just like, nah, this is Final Fantasy. It's goofy as hell while also being super serious. Like I come and bother you from my Final Fantasy 15 car, drive by your FC house and,
yeah,
do like weird emotes and we have Mountain Dew. So
exactly.
it's whatever.
Yeah, like everybody's gonna be running around on Big Mountain Zoos here in a little bit. They're stopping by Big Sippin's house, but Pictomancer is
Uh,
breaking the immersion.
I thought that he cleared Omega Ultimate, which I have not done, and I was like, damn, the Mountain Dew guy really showed me up here. So that's kind of
You need more
that's
dew,
cool.
Andrea. You need more
Yeah,
dew.
yeah. Otherwise, that's really I don't have too many other thoughts on Pictomancer other than I really gotta like get on that and run some early extreme trials and see what it's
Yeah.
like.
I think it's going to be exciting to see other people play because, like, when I was playing, I was just really out of my depth because I'm
Yeah.
not a caster. But it was really intriguing to me the fact that, like, you are not actually fighting, everything
Mhm.
else is fighting for you, but you have to set it all up very specifically. And
Mhm.
I think that that's that's just interesting to me. Like, I want to know who those players, like, I want to know who's gonna level a Pictomancer to 100 and that's their new main. Like, please, like, and not like derogatorily, but like genuine, like that's a level of concentration and setup that I think is really cool that we're getting to do with a new class. Because again, I feel like a lot of it has been click, click, click.
Yeah. No, it's anytime a new job like joins the fray, regardless of how like where it ultimately lands, like in favorites or metas or
Hmm.
whatever it may be, that those first few months of everybody trying to like figure it out and piece together, and like you have the people who are doing like the super smart people math min maxing that I could only dream of doing. And then you have the people like me that are just like, I don't know how I got here, but I just got the mount. Cool, bye. Um, those seeing all of that like kind of clash and that struggle to figure out who falls where. I love that early Final Fantasy XIV
Yeah.
part of figuring it all out that you can only really do in this time frame, not to
Yes.
stoke the FOMO in anybody,
Yeah.
but it's such a
Well,
cool moment.
Well, and I will say, like, I think that that's another reason why I'm really excited because this is the first time because we've cleared all the expansions except for Heavensward. I was an ARR, I was dying, and my husband was like, "We need to just pay to get past this because you're gonna check out, but I need you to make it through."
I'm
And
glad you
we
did.
cooked. I did. I've been playing because we came on right before Stormblood
Mhm.
launched, and so that's how long we've been playing. But this is my first time that I am geared up. I have done the MSQ. I have everything ready for Dawntrail, and it is exciting to be ready to take something on and like not have to catch up. And
Yeah.
that's a feeling I haven't gotten before. So like I completely agree. Like it's like this is the time to jump into it. And I think to kind of like as we wind down
Yeah.
talking, I think that what the preview event really did for me, outside of just getting to walk around the beautiful Tural, because it's amazing, and play with classes and talk to Yoshi-P, we had I think you were in your interview when this happened, but
Mhm.
we took on an S
Oh, I
rank
remember that.
and it was amazing because we were all just sitting at our computers. They had set up TeamSpeak. None of us were bothering with it. And so you had a sage on one end calling out stuff for the people on the other side. And it was me and another tank right next to me. And there was a scholar way the hell at the other side of the big area. And we were like literally shoutcasting for everybody to know what to do, and we cleared it, and it was one of those moments that was like all like the demoist and the devs and everybody who was around us were just kind of like rooting for us and going like, oh my god, they're gonna take on Queen Bee, they're gonna take on Queen Bee, and just like picking up people. And I think that like I've been in love with Final Fantasy 14 for a while now, but I think that that moment and getting to experience like what I experience online in person really like I don't know, man. It was beautiful. Like it sounds cheesy, but it was just, it reminded me why I play this game, why I'm invested in this game,
Yeah.
and the joy that other people had. And we kept dying. Like we wiped like 7 times
Yeah.
before we finally beat it. Um, but it was a moment. And I think that that's a moment whether it's as a gaming journalist career or anything, like I think that's a moment that I'm going to take with me just as a gamer. Like
Mhm.
that is a core memory now, and I'm really excited I got to have it.
I love that. And now I'm mad I missed it. Like, no, but you putting it all that way, like, look, I met Kate for everyone today. I mean, we were Twitter mutes, but that's nothing. Like,
Yeah.
we met in LA, like during this, and I was like, holy shit, save wavelength, like this, okay. Uh, but hearing you talk about that, and I remember whenever I was leaving to go into my interview, hearing Michael Hyam, shout out to Michael, his new position over at IGN for tech editor. You can catch out his coverage, I'm sure. He was yelling for healers to come join y'all. And he was on Picto, I think, at this point,
Yes,
and like yelling that
because
he
the
had no
boys that we
idea.
were with, shout out to Moises, Jesse, and Michael Hyam, were like, "Oh, what if we run Picto to beat this?"
Never me.
They
Now I'm
did switch
actually
out.
glad.
They did
Okay,
switch
okay,
out. They
good,
did. By
good.
the
God
end,
bless.
they yeah. I think Moises stayed as a Picto, but the other ones did switch out.
And y'all cleared it. Like, this is the type of stuff that I love, though. And meeting people over it just speaks, I think, really to that kind of community feeling.
Yeah,
And more than anything, I am really just looking forward to being part of this moment and seeing more and learning more about why people love Dawntrail, why they love, whether it be, the sightseeing in it or some of the raid memories, some of the story reveals, all of that stuff I love with every expansion. Even if I am sour on a raid tier or something like that, I always walk away with these types of experiences, and I'm excited. And I'm excited to see you experience your first one where you're ready for
yeah.
everything.
I hit 660 yesterday.
Let's go. Yeah, let's go. I'm right there with you. I'm trying to like gear up some extra stuff just in case I
Yeah,
want
I
to
was like,
like
well,
play
man,
something.
what if somebody else wants to take? I should gear up my Sam, and I think
Yep.
my Sam's at like 645 right now. I'm like, I can
Yeah.
before Dawn Trail, I can get that to at least 657.
You're gonna be like woefully over prepared. And nothing's gonna matter till
I'm
like
just
your
gonna
mid
show.
90s.
I'm just gonna show up and like all hulking and just like everything, just like little flowers and Pictomancers running around. I'm like, oh, sorry.
Just drag me through while I'm like fumbling along on the new jobs. Just cover me. There we go. That's the word I couldn't remember.
Well, that is my job as a tank.
There we go.
Andrea, thank you so much for talking with me today. Do you have any final thoughts for folks?
I don't have anything really now. I hope everyone is ready to carry me through. I hope we are all nice and cordial as the servers back up. And if you are on Primal, please be kind to me whenever I'm stumbling through the dungeons on Picto.
Yeah, also be kind to your tanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Be kind to your tanks.
Give Kate the X-Cog.
Yeah. Also, if you're on Primal, maybe throw me a commendation now or then
Yeah,
if you see a little hot tank paladin running around in a dungeon. It may be me.
you're tall.
I am very tall.
Actually, your character is very tall.
Yeah, Andrea, why don't you tell people where they can find you and they can read your coverage?
So you can find me over on Twitter. I'm Majora, but with two A's. So that's Maajora. And then you can find my coverage over at destructoid.com.
And you can find me at OMFrander on Twitter and all social media. And you can find all of my work at butwhythough.net and down below in the description thing. I don't know if people click those links, but I put them there. Thank you again, Andrea. And for everybody out there, like, get ready for Dawn Trail, y'all. Like, it is time. It's a beautiful time.